We could leverage technology and leverage the environment to help address issues instead of having police officers stand at a post, maybe create a pathway where vehicles can access or not access areas differently. How can we leverage CPTED for the future of policing? How can we include our community in these processes and not always rely on a human police officer having to solve all the things for all communities and all people?
Welcome to MuniSquare Podcast. I'm Nancy Hess, and today I'm excited to bring you a conversation about a topic that might be new to you. It certainly was to me. Crime prevention through environmental design, or CPTED. What does it mean to design a space in ways that make people feel safe? And how do we rethink public areas, not just for everyday use, but for the big, high-energy events that draw large crowds? To explore these questions, I'm joined by two thoughtful and experienced guests. Gary Wong, a complexity facilitator who works at the intersection of systems, strategy, and community, and Dr. Francia Done Henry, a law enforcement and security expert, consultant, and adjunct professor with deep experience in both the theory and practice of public safety. Together we unpack what CPTED actually is and how it's applied in real communities. How lighting, layout, and visibility can be subtle but powerful tools in preventing crime. The tensions between creating open, welcoming spaces and ensuring they remain secure. And how CPTED principles can guide planning for large-scale events, like parades, festivals, or rallies, especially in towns not used to hosting big crowds. This conversation bridges disciplines, design thinking, urban planning, public safety, and human behavior, and speaks to the kind of integrative thinking we love to explore here on the MuniSquare Podcast. We're still new to Substack, and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these conversations that cross professional and geographic boundaries, we hope you'll follow us, share with a colleague, and help grow this community devoted to elevating public service. Now let's get started. Francia, give us some of your origin thinking about these design ideas with respect to safety.
My perspective on CPTED in terms of how it relates to Gary's ideas and background derive from my executive level expertise in law enforcement, where years ago I received a certification in crime prevention through environmental design. And it was a training that included engineers and community planners, as well as government folks that looked at crime prevention for large-scale designs and long-term evolutions of communities and cities in particular. So ever since I had that training, I just had a different mindset in terms of police response and how we look at not just the law enforcement perspective of how things would be done, but how communities can include that lens in their long-term designs and how they operationalize their day-to-day safety plans and in event planning. When you look at large-scale events, it's fresh on my mind because of the 250th anniversary of the United States, large sporting events. We often look at police and law enforcement as a response to something and just going to incidents, but there's a great opportunity to start looking at law enforcement, security, and safety proactively in designing solutions, in creating resources as we plan towards the future in those events and communities. I'll pause there, Gary. I'll pass it to you to share your perspectives.
I'm excited to chat. Being an engineer, I talk about natural science, the emerging field of complexity science. Now, having said that, and just read, Nancy, your posting yesterday, talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson's laws of nature. this really fits quite well because, of course, Emerson wrote about the inherent order, harmony, and interconnectedness of the natural world. That's really what I'm all about. And just a bit of my background, I stumbled across that from a different view, and that was from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. I became a certified instructor, and I taught, live, love, learn, leave a legacy. It was all about that harmony and looking at principles. So the other thing is that I'm very focused on principles, probably more than values. Principles are those timeless things that happen whether you like them or not. Law of gravity just happens, right? Whether you like it or not. So that's why I looked at CPTED and core principles. And I did some homework. I found out that there's a Canadian CPTED. I kind of went in that, read about the history, and this is Gary, opening up the box and just seeing what's in this new box here. And I see that's very principle based. As this conversation unfolds, you'll see me talking a lot about principles and how we can integrate, maybe blend those principles together.
I think that would be terrific. That's a great idea. This is a brand new area of expertise we could start building on scientifically with the principles that you just mentioned, and then having almost an overlap as we look to create maybe a roadmap for solutions communities can use to build on.
This is where we play in complexity science. Education, whether it's into, in our case here, maybe policing and community. Applied scientists love taking solid science and theory and applying it and seeing where it goes. Now, I make this because a lot of people look at science, complexity science, and they think of computative science complexity. That's what the Scientific Institute started off with back in 1984 when they first launched, and they were the ones that defined what a complex adaptive system. But they chose to go down a path called agent modeling. They discovered mathematically why birds flock, fish swarm. Dave says, humans are not fish. We're not ants. We're not birds. We're a bit different because we can look at our environment with feedback and decide to do something differently. Humans are much more unpredictable than other organic things. If we're different, how do we discover those differences? We come under the term applied complexity. We started with cognitive complexity, which I like, reminds me of cognitive neuroscience and brain research. Dave has moved on to anthropocomplexity to bring in storytelling and ethnography. I was motivated in your introduction, but you want to look at elements that influence safety instead of just focusing on policing. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. I'm absorbing these theoretical diagrams that you're sharing with us because I would love to delve more into them. In terms of what I am suggesting that we start looking at differently with crime prevention through environmental design, this includes using elements that already exist in design, such as greenery and plants and lighting. And those can include designs that incorporate safety and security elements to direct people, avoid certain areas, reduce crowds by using landscaping, building designs. And it can be anything that is aesthetically pleasing while also incorporating the safety and security technologies that are needed to monitor and address any issues that may arise. We can use statistical data to look at trends and patterns of crowds, where people go, and the flow of people, making it accessible to where they need to be. It requires a more pragmatic approach to design and building and weaves in the safety and security element.
So I just created this little graphic behind me as I read through the principles about defensible space. I was trying to figure out where does this come in. I think what you've been talking about comes under one of these elements.
I think all of them, natural surveillance. So being like having your hedges placed just so where you could still see out and where people maybe can or cannot see into certain areas that you want restricted. Natural access control, same thing. Creating those pathways where you don't want a big open area where crowds can just flow in. You want to have maybe walkways, a certain width, certain length, and certain materials and on. Territorial reinforcement, same thing. Making bollards, and you can have them be concrete, different materials, or you can have just planters where you can prevent vehicles from driving into certain areas. It has to be realistic, easily replaceable, easy to maintain without a lot of support needed, and easy turnover where you need to replace an item.
When I looked at the acronym, crime prevention through environmental design, the word design made me think about safety by design. It's an engineering perspective. I have friends that do that stuff, and they talk about affordance. What's affordance? You look at an object like a hedge. What does the hedge afford? A hedge provides beauty, aesthetics, but it also provides a physical barrier, depending if it's high or low. Maybe it allows you to jump over it or sit on it. When I talk about safety by design, I think about the complicated domain. You're working as an expert engineer with known knowns. You know what you're working with, like a hedge, and you can design that to create a nice barrier. Then you take your design and you give it to the people down below in the clear domain. So in the clear domain, the workers get the nice instructions and the plans to say, build a hedge this way, this high, and position it over here. You want good plans that are fail-safe. Workers with good habits would follow the best practices, and ta-da, we get a nice hedge as it's well designed. On the right side of the framework, we talk about robustness. Robustness means it is very solid. If it takes a hit, it bounces back. It's difficult to destroy a hedge. It'll flex and stay there, so it has robustness. I always think back to the days of the Timex watches, where they would take a hit and keep on ticking. That's robustness. We also talk about what happens on the left-hand side. The right-hand side is about predictability. If we do this, then we get that. It's very stable, repeatable. As humans, we like that order. On the left-hand side, situations are uncertain, predictable. If you do this, you may not get that. Just because you did this doesn't mean the humans will behave like it did the last time. That's what makes it very unpredictable. It actually makes working with humans because of that. All those tools the workers had on the right side don't work on the left side. We need different tools. I'll get into that later if we've got time. So what we can talk about now is affordance, but from a resilience point of view. Robustness on the right, resilience on the left. And this is not an either or, this is a both and. And the value of the Cannabis framework is it describes really what the real world is. And it's a world that we want both robustness and we want resilience. Mm. So with that sort of thinking behind my head, when I looked at whether you have a police force guarding things, whether you want to put up cameras everywhere, that's all about robustness, which is good. It sounds to me, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know the whole area. There are a lot of consultants that are in that field right now. Just reading the history of the CPTED Canada, It's ex-policemen, it's RCMP people, and what I learned from my podcast with Nancy and Lou Hayes, there's a big manual of do's and don'ts. As Lou told us, that's fine, but it's not sufficient. So essentially, he was saying, we're really good at robustness, but we're not very good at resilience. So resilience are what happens when things do break, when things do change. How do we respond to that and somehow survive?
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I've been saying so far?
Absolutely. I would say, in terms of looking at, you mentioned the consultants thinking about the robust nature of the design part of CPTED. What's missing, in my opinion, is that expertise. I call it the so what. So you have these principles, guidelines, and laws or policies and procedures that are traditionally followed, but having that good mojo of people that have been in the field, that have practiced in all areas of the spectrum on the design part, from the engineers, from the security and law enforcement folks, which are two categories, right? They often overlap and it may be similar in some areas, but security, law enforcement, surveillance, and enforcement, all of those thought leaders should be brought to the table to get a good CPTED plan for any community. It comes down to having a good understanding and respect for the field. So just like I recognize your background and the value that you bring in helping to bring forth some of these solutions that can be used in the future, I think the same needs to be done for the security and the law enforcement folks that could really shed some light and be proactive about addressing issues that may happen in any design.
A lot of people think that complex systems are chaotic. No, they're not. There's actually hidden order in a complex system. Again, this is why fish swarm, birds flock. That leads us to think, why are they doing that? And the big thing that I have been promoting, just not myself, but others, leaders in safety thinking, safety is not something that you build like a product or deliver like a service. Safety is an emergent property of complex systems. If we introduce certain systemic conditions, safety will emerge. And by the way, if we overuse a condition, a barrier, like too many rules, danger emerges. And we've seen that. We're also like, one rule is good, two rules is better. 6 inches manual, that's got to be really good. And this is what, remember, Lou talked about having these 6 manuals, which police officers are expected, and you probably know this more than I do, Francia, are expected to know every page in there and have it in their back pocket. I looked at that and I got excited because I looked at what they call your second generation CPTED. So I figured, look at these 4 things, look what it says. Does that ever fit with complex adaptive systems? Right there. The fact that the environment can affect behavior, but it doesn't create community.
So this is certainly, and I purposely didn't mention these categories because I feel like that could be a whole nother podcast, back to the original CPTED and then looking at it from the whole policing lens. One of the motivators, aside from it just being something we need to think about as government professionals and consultants, is that policing is shifting in many ways. One big problem at the forefront of our discussions is recruiting and hiring police officers. So you wouldn't think that has anything to do with CPTED and engineering, but this is one of the potential solutions to how can we be more intentional about looking at the future of policing by designing systems and places more purposefully to include safety and security initiatives and not always relying on a police officer responding. When we create something, it can be set up in a way where maybe we could leverage technology and leverage the environment to help address issues instead of having police officers stand at a post. Maybe create a pathway where vehicles can access or not access areas differently. How can we leverage CPTED for the future of policing? How can we include our community in these processes and not always rely on a human police officer having to solve all the things for all communities and all people?
Let's talk that through as a working example. Can you give me an event you use as an example? Do you want to use NFL Day? You want to use America 250, FIFA? What would be a good example?
I think FIFA would be a good one because they've occurred all around the world.
Vancouver, 2026. We're experiencing it now in South Memorial Park, where all the seniors go every morning to run around, to do exercising. That's going to be taken away from them. Why? Because we have to put a training soccer field there, right? So that's already caused issues. I can really relate to FIFA, but let's use that as an example. What we would do, and I'll just, again, brief usage how the tools work here. We could start collecting experiences from people. Is that going to be in Philadelphia? FIFA?
Yes,
No.
there's FIFA in Philadelphia and Los Angeles.
Let's talk to Philadelphia. You can start collecting experiences from people about the last time you attended any sporting event similar to FIFA. What made you feel safe? What made you feel unsafe? And that could be, of course, the fact that the Eagles won the Super Bowl. It could be all those little parties in the bars, police presence, high-fiving or carrying batons with shields. I don't know. You could have one person write a story. I was feeling good until I got this tap on the shoulder from a baton. And it was a cop saying, move your bike. You're blocking traffic. That's an experience. Under sense making, we capture the emotional feelings of that experience. How did it make you feel? Safe? Safer? Oh, thank you, Mr. Policeman. Never thought about that. I will move my bike.
Oh, Gary, I would challenge that and add, we need to look beyond those experiences with how the police officer made a person feel. How did that environment make you feel safe or unsafe? Was
Yes.
it dark in the street, in the alley, and you felt someone could jump out and attack you at any time? Or did
No.
you feel the area was well lit, enough space? Or you felt comfortable
No.
walking from place to place? Maybe there were call boxes, monitors, where if you've ever walked into a retail store, you see yourself on the camera, right? That reflection makes you think twice about your behavior. Those would be the types of solutions that I think we should be looking at, the analysis and focusing less on the actual police people.
I'd like to see if, Gary, we have a few minutes because I know Francia has a hard stop. If we were to form takeaways for next steps, what would you, Francia, most like to see in a follow-up? You may need time to think about this, but is there anything that you would offer at this point that would be of interest to you to develop in a subsequent conversation?
Yeah, I want to see what realistic opportunities exist for CPTED planning in the government space and our communities. And while Gary and I consider ourselves experts in discussing these topics and providing feedback and recommendations, how can we leverage our expertise to create solid plans and resources for CPTED planning?
Thank you, Francia. Thank you, Gary, for the slides and all your thought that you put into this today. Good.
Well, happy to be here.
We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye.
What you do